Oh, I turned my ringer off.
What's up, guys? It's James from Adrenaline. I have with me tonight Hans Semelsberger. He is the Director of Product Development for DLX Technologies. He's the main man when it comes to the design of the Luxe, the Shocker, and really all the guns that they've made in the last, how many years, Hans? 20, 25 years, 30 years?
Since 2004.
So, yeah, so 20 years. Wow. Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome. So tonight, Hans doesn't do this often, so we're glad to have him. We're going to do a more high-end, high-level technical talk tonight about, the core, the operation of the Luxe, and some of the improvements of the Idol versus the TM40. And we're going to answer your questions. If you have tech questions, like how often do I clean my reg, or what's the spool do, or any of that stuff, we'll try to go through it. So now's your chance. I told people if you have a wish list for like the Luxe of 2030, you want an adjustable rake trigger or something, tell Hans he can put it on the board. I don't know if you'll get it or not, but you can mention it. Yeah. So Hans has an Idol there with him today. So what do you want to do? Do you want to start off with the gun? You want me to bring things on screen, or how would you like to show some of the improvements that you've made on this generation over, like, for instance, the TM40?
So we'll start with the gun in front of me, and then we'll cycle through the images. So this model had a lot of redesign. This is probably the largest redesign we've done with a Luxe model to date. We did a lot of redesigning in the trigger frame and the electronics group, and a noticeable upgrade to the bolt system. Okay, so I'll start with the electronics group because we don't have a lot of slides to show that, and you can see it pretty well just from what I have in front of me. So first off, we fully redesigned the grip frame, the rubber grip itself, obviously. The one thing we changed that really makes it a lot more user-friendly for the end user is we incorporated a back strap. So if you're kind of out of the real handgun world or anything like that, this is something familiar to them, where you can have removable back straps. You can get some that are shaped to fill the palm better, or just, kind of fit this frame to your liking. So that's an option going forward because this piece is removable. And
so just make sure they understand what you're saying there is custom shaped back straps. Like if you have a really big hand or something like that, you could get a custom back strap.
Right. So you can have this thing more arched in the lower section to fill your hand better, depending on your hand size. The shape of this just can be more or less filling to small hand, large hand. A lot of pistols do this. It's very common in the handgun world because your grip is so critical to your aiming and your trigger pull. So what we did on top of that, so we have an all metal back strap. Okay. Now I'm just going to remove this off screen. By pulling on the bottom section here, we have a metal clip that snaps in at the bottom and locks it in, and a post on the top that inserts into a hole at the top of the frame. Okay, once I pull this back strap off, all right, now I have access to my battery, charging port, tournament lock. So really easy if I want to remove the battery. Now we just have a flip up metal tab, pull that up, drop the battery out. That quick to access it. And obviously once I drop it back in, just flip that metal latch back down. Your charging port, let me get a cable here just to show this.
And while you're doing that, the battery's been fixed as far as, one of the issues of it coming loose.
So yeah, I'll go into more detail on that with the previous design and several design changes we've done to improve the connection of this battery with the idle. So right there is your USB-C charging port, or if you're going to reflash the board, upgrade software, you're just going to go right through that port right there. The back strap itself has a rubber seal inside. So all of these compartments are sealed to keep out water, debris. The grips or the back strap itself also seals along the back edge, the entire side of this back part of the grip. So it's really enclosed well and sealed off from any mud, dirt, and debris you're going to get from holding this thing. So
now let me just say this too, like we have a lot of questions popping in already. Let's let Hans go through a lot of the stuff so we didn't get distracted. Like people are like, hey, how much does Echo Mode save in terms of battery life? Once we get through some of the changes and some of the tech, we'll go to question and answer. And we'll just fly through these. So if we don't get to your question, just mention it again when we get to question and answer. Go ahead.
Okay. So on the side here, obviously we've gone with a full color 1.3 inch full color LCD screen. LCD as opposed to OLED. LCD, you get the full color. You also get daylight readable. Now, obviously, if you got super bright sunlight glaring off this screen cover, it's still going to have an effect on how readable it's going to be, but this is much more readable than like an OLED in sunlight. So a more readable screen while you're on the field. I'll try and get to this without the lights here.
That's booting up. What's up, Neil? I'm sure it's 1 or 2 a.m.
Oh, Neil's on?
Yeah, what would it be, 2 a.m. where he's at, or 1 a.m. probably?
We didn't get enough of this last week in Vegas.
Right.
So this is Zach's gun. Zach's one of our techs. He was out at Vegas as well, and his grips and everything he plays front. He's a snake player, so his gun is extremely dirty. I just wiped it off really quick, but you can see Zach plays almost every week, and he's one of our good in-house testers. We obviously have a lot of we have several pro players that work with us. We have Ryan Moorhead, Sam Monville, and several other divisional guys. So we have a lot of in-house people for testing. And
a lot were in Vegas, like Nick Carney. I know his team shot him in Vegas. He's saying the marker shot great in Vegas. There was a lot of people using them out in Vegas with great results. Yeah. And so we have a lot of good feedback internally just from people that play here. A lot of us, Adam, myself, and some of us are just playing mech now because we're just kind of retired from the electronic scene. But that's good for mech users when you're all about mech and I'm all about mech. It means people get really good mech stuff.
Yeah. So anyways, back to the design. So with the obviously we have the screen. We've gone to a larger full color screen. And one thing you'll notice, we specifically put this screen high on the frame. Okay. We didn't want to compromise the grip surface where you're mainly holding the gun. You hold your gun low, or even if you're holding it at the normal position, this is your grip area. Okay. So that's where you need the grip texture, the soft rubber. We didn't want to compromise that. It would have been easier putting the screen in the lower cavity down here. There's just more room, but we intentionally kept it high so it didn't interfere with your feel of this trigger frame. This
is a good question for right now too. There is a slight little, small plastic screen. Like if you open that grip up, it's not an open square. There's like a screen protector, so to speak, I guess, right?
Well, the screen cover is built into the actual grip itself.
It's into the grip. Yeah, the rubber grip.
And the screen just sits in a pocket, a machine pocket in the frame underneath. So the location of the screen was specifically placed high so that we, like I said, we didn't compromise the feel and the shape of the palm swells and the material that you're feeling here. So the electronics group, there's a lot of changes that happened there. One, we went with a different trigger switch. So our trigger switch is what we call an extended arm trigger switch. It's a longer activation switch. And what that does is it gives us a higher contact point. We have more leverage on the switch. It also allowed us to put a metal back wall behind the switch. So if you set your trigger to where it's over traveling on the switch itself, you can't damage this switch assembly like you could on previous models.
Yeah, and a lot of people were using aftermarket triggers, and a lot of boards had to be soldered, right? I mean, that's been fixed, I guess, is what I'm saying. If you use an aftermarket trigger, you're not going to break the switch.
You'll notice it's a lighter trigger pull. We also added more adjustment range on the top screws that control magnet tension, return force, and post and pre-travel. So that allowed us to set the trigger for an even lighter pull weight. And then that.
Let me ask this then. So I think with all the changes, the answer to this question is no, right?
What's that? Sorry.
Can you see the screen? Does the TM40 trigger fit the idles? What they asked. And
no. It's a shorter arm on the back of this trigger. So another thing we did was we reduced the pocket size, the window behind the trigger, just to reduce the chance of paint getting in there, any debris. So since we're contacting the switch at a higher position, we were able to pull that opening up and reduce the amount of window size there where the trigger inserts into.
Nice.
So so the back arm of this trigger is shorter and different from a TM40 trigger.
We'll show that. I'll bring up, when we start bringing some of the images up and the CAD and stuff like that, we'll show it.
Okay. Another thing you touched on, the battery design. So obviously in the idle, we have a metal latch that locks this battery into place. And when that metal latch is down and the back strap is on, it cannot lift. It cannot open. So it is very securely locked in position. On the TM40, we had a kind of a wedge that locked the battery in place. So this one's just a little more solid and locked in. We've made several improvements to the battery connection ever since we've gone with this new battery design, which is a kind of a digital camera style battery. And we've made improvements to the actual battery itself. The contact pads we've increased. All your lithium ion batteries have a circuit board inside that controls short circuit protection and things like that. We've made changes to the circuit board inside just to make it more rigid and solid for the contact points. We've also changed the contacts on the circuit board. We went from spring pins to a wire form shape that's just a lot more durable and not affected by impact like the spring designs were. So there's been several changes on that and the circuit board itself. So it's a lot more durable design than we've ever had before. So, and like I said, it's just a lot quicker and easier to swap this thing out or charge it compared to the previous models. So you'll notice there's no grip screws anywhere on this grip. So no points there for anything to get in. So that covers the circuit board for the most part.
Yeah, why don't you talk about the posts, for the ASA and the body? I think that's a big deal.
Right. So one of the things we would commonly see at the events is players taking a nasty dive, running into a bunker, accidentally, an intentional dive, an accidental dive, landing on their gun and knocking the ASA loose. Well, with our previous designs, if you knock this ASA loose between it and the frame, you would get a leak. So essentially, your gun was down for the game. So what we did was we incorporated a double O-ring post. And I know you have a screen image of or a image
Yeah, I'll
of
bring it
this
up here in a minute.
but we have a double O-ring stainless post that countersinks this O-ring into the body and the frame, and same with the ASA and the frame. So your frame could come loose from your body, your ASA could come loose from your frame, and it doesn't lose its seal. So if you fall and take a nasty drop and you would knock your ASA loose, as soon as you come off, you just retighten it up, but you're not going to lose your seal during the game. So you're going to be able to play through it. So that was a big improvement for just the durability of the gun with things we see at, NXL events and things like that. Guys that are just, playing all out. And,
I feel like they took kept a chart of like the most things that people were bringing guns up and just knocked them out, like battery, the post on the ASA, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you guys did a great job of knocking all that out.
Yeah, and we have our own techs along with several other, like Neil from clear across the world. So we're seeing all this stuff, and every event they come back, we kind of review and see if there's things that we can improve or redesign to eliminate some of these things that we see happening. So especially if it's a regular occurrence. So some other things we've changed. We have a new flex ribbon design. This one, the lower circuit is a lot shorter circuit. It only comes down part way into the frame, and it's not a plug-in connection. It's attached with a screw into the frame, and the board just lays right over top of it. So it's an easier connection that you can't damage like some of the previous ones. If you just yanked on them, you could tear the ribbon. This one, because of it being a shorter length and the way it's locked in, you can't accidentally just pull it out without, you have to intentionally remove 2 screws to take this circuit out. The upper vision circuit, we went with some new contacts on this, which give a longer working range of the contacts. So with the TM40, the front latch position up here, you have this adjustable latch. The red piece you see right here is what the front pin locks onto. So this pin, when it was inserted into this red retaining part, that the position of that had to be set pretty precise, or else your frame could move enough to where it would lose contact with those vision sensors.
I had that. So where we do a lot of mech, every adrenaline comes with a mech frame. Sometimes I would adjust it to where the mech frame would go on well. And then once out of every 50 or 100, it would say no eyes. Like I had to go back and adjust it again just to make sure I had it in between. So that's
with the amount of working range we have with these new contacts, you can't set your latch loose enough to lose contact.
Yeah.
So it works over the entire range of the mechanical adjustment of that latch. So just eliminates any precision fitting of that front latch. So that just makes it easier for users and the techs and anybody that might play around with those adjustments. Most people don't even know where they are or how to do them. There's 2 access holes in the front of the frame that you would normally insert an Allen key, a 1/16 Allen key, to adjust that front latch position. Now you can just kind of set it loose and never have to even think about it.
That's good. I used to have to do that a lot.
And the same thing with the rear latch. If this was the O-ring seals that we use on our post are a thicker O-ring and a much more durable material than we use than the past one. And the past one, the lower section of that post that was in the frame was a threaded post that screwed into the frame and had to be Loctited. So one thing we found is that in really high temperature areas, the Loctite could get soft and kind of lose its seal temporarily. So one thing we tried to do was eliminate all Loctite plugs in the entire gun. We actually only have one we still have, which is up in the very front section of the barrel bore. In there is a plug for the top reg port. That was one we were not able to eliminate, but every other threaded plug that we were using Loctite on before has been replaced with either an O-ring seal or a rubber type plug.
It's not just that either. Too, you have the pushed in pins like on the feed deck lever. That's now have a C clip. The magnets.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so for people re-anodizing, for instance, like one of our quick ship guns.
Yeah, this matters to people like you. Most people
for our customers. Right.
Yeah,
well,
most people
great for them.
wouldn't notice this, but yeah, the feed tube toggle can now be removed just by popping off a C clip and
pushing. Yeah, for the anodizers, it used to be a major problem. Now you can just pop the C clip.
Yeah, and the same thing was with all the magnets in the design. So all the magnets in the gun are now retained with wire forms or clips, so they can easily be removed and reinserted without the use of any special tools or experience. Those were something that if a customer would have gotten their gun re-anodized, they would have had to send it back to us and had us reinstall the magnets. One, to make sure they were oriented correctly, and two, just to make sure that they were locked in correctly, because we used some mechanical punches to lock them in, and it wasn't something an average person.
I mean, you eliminated having to send it to you guys, then to the anodizer, and back to you guys. Now it could go pretty much to the anodizer. He can disassemble it, reassemble it.
Yeah, and that's in everything. The eye covers, the body. We eliminated the magnet in the bottom of the lever of the ASA. So it's we either eliminated them or retained them with something that's user friendly to replace or remove now.
So if you want to wait till we bring it up on screen, or we can do that now. Someone asked about any revisions, even on the stock level, to the mechanical frame.
The mechanical, yes. I don't have one here. I have yours here. I don't have one here.
No one's even seen mine yet. So but go ahead. Here you go.
So the mechanical frame for the idol shares the same double O-ring post on the top of the frame and to the ASA. So you get that added durability of your seal. Both the stock idol frame and yours, we shifted the position of the trigger guard pocket down, so you get basically a lower pull on your trigger, and
you're farther away from the pivot point. I tried to explain that on our video.
Yeah, so you're getting a longer trigger, so you're getting a longer leverage point. So, and it's the rules are stated. We actually wrote the rules, but it's 1.3 inches for the inside of your trigger guard. So that's the legal limit. Anything over that, we felt would make it too easy for people to just walk a trigger. Surprisingly, some people found a way to walk a trigger with even a 1.3 inch trigger guard. I would not have thought so. I thought that size was plenty good for single finger triggers, but I did not think people were going to be able to actually walk a single trigger with that size opening. I can't do it, but there's quite a few people that can. So anyways, we shifted the, yours has the longest trigger that we've done. So yours is going to give a bit more leverage than our idol. But that was a change we did on both. And then, like I said, you're sharing the seals on the frame to body and frame to ASA. So
you want me to bring up?
We can get into more years later with your ASA.
Yeah. Do you want me to bring up the screen? So, because if you're going to talk about the core, and a lot of people don't even know how the core works, like where the air is held, at what point it releases. You may bring that up so you can start walking through some of that.
Yeah. Well, so another design goal of the idol was to improve brittle paint handling and just general improve. We're always trying to improve the shot signature, the feel of the shot. That's always something we're tinkering around with. So we've made a big improvement on the bolt system. And sometimes, I know we've talked about this before, and everybody expects that when you make a change on a bolt system, you're going to pull something out. It's going to look completely different. And that's just not the case for making improvements on your bolt system. You don't have to change things drastically. It's like I've told you before, small changes make big differences. So what we did on the idle bolt system is we added what we call an air skirt on the back of this bolt. And what this does is it stages the release of air on the ball to get a softer initial impact on the ball. And with the paint that people are shooting nowadays at these events, I mean, it's insane. They want something you can drop from knee high and it shatters like glass, and we had to really play around with ways to be able to shoot that. And it wasn't easy. It took a lot of iterations of the bolt design. to get that. And, we did it, but it wasn't easy, and it wasn't a really just obvious, straightforward thing to do. So this is your bolt I'm holding in my hand here that has the grooves on there, which is a little different from our idle bolt. But yeah, the air skirt on the back of here is really what makes the difference for the brittle paint handling. We've also changed some O-ring grooves and materials to improve mechanical performance and also extend the maintenance cycles. So reduce the amount of times you have to grease the bolt system. So for example, this O-ring on the front of the bolt guide right here, this used to be a harder 90 durometer O-ring. We're now using a 70 durometer O-ring. It was because of changes we did on the bolt that allowed that. That allows the bolt cycle to be faster, which is a benefit for mech users. The faster bolt you have for mech, the more time you have for paint to feed. So that was an improvement for that.
There's going to be a question and answer session later, but I want to just get this out here right now. So the 2 O-ring locations, do you have a recommendation if you're playing mech or mostly mech or 90% mech about the second O-ring location?
Yes. So what you're referring to is the front can here. So we've always had on the TM40, we added an O-ring on the front of our can up here that could, let me see if I can get that in the picture there. That would, I gotta get the right there. That would position itself over that vent hole right there. Okay. And I don't have a pick to move this, and my fingers are not going to be able to grab that. But by moving that O-ring position off that hole or over that hole, you had a slight adjustment on the bolt speed. And what that was for extremely fragile paint on the TM40 that gave us a way to further reduce or soften the shot cycle with really, really fragile paint. So we still have it on the idle. What we did was we added a O-ring groove. So you now have a on or off position. If the O-ring's in the rear position, you're full speed on the bolt. And if the O-ring's in the forward position, you're a slightly slower bolt speed.
And so the lower position would be mech, pretty much,
yes,
right?
Yes, I always recommend taking this O-ring back to the second position for mech. And that's just because, mech, even though we all think we're really fast on the trigger, we're nowhere near as fast as a solenoid valve. So, anything we can do to allow this bolt cycle to operate faster, it's going to help us with mech. And that's something I know you and I have touched on it, James, in the past, but it's a mech operating gun is honestly a more challenging gun design than electronic. There's a lot more things that we have to try and design out of a mech gun. And what I mean by that is there's things we have to try and design the trigger system, the valve, the mech valve system. We have to design it in a way to compensate for poor trigger pulls. When people start pulling fast, they short stroke, or sometimes they pull slow on the beginning and fast on the release, and or short stroking both sides of that. And so what we had to do a lot of design changes and testing to make our mech valve and our bolt system work so much better than the mechanical speed of your finger to eliminate short stroking, chopping, all those negative things that come with from a person's just uniquely different and inconsistent trigger pulls. So
let me just,
for example, one thing was this: we added a QEV. This was added on the TM40. We did not have that on the prior version of the X. TM40 was the first version we went mech with, and that QEV makes the shot cycle much more responsive. So most people with electronic gun, you're probably never going to notice that. And if you never notice it, it's actually working, because what this will allow with an electronic gun is for it to operate through a partially compromised solenoid valve, a partly clogged debris contamination in your solenoid valve can obviously affect the shot cycle. A QEV helps compensate for that. With a mech frame,
Is it quick
mech
exhaust vent
operation,
or quick exhaust valve?
quick exhaust valve. QEV is
Valve.
quick
Okay.
exhaust valve. So that just shortcuts the exhaust path when you fire the gun. And it basically just allows the shuttle inside of this bolt assembly to cycle almost as fast in mech as it does with electronic.
So we're going to do
that's
a question
a big
and
thing
answer
because that eliminates short stroking with an average user whenever they're getting excited and trying to shoot fast, and they don't realize it, but there's a lot of times they're short stroking or pulling slow at times. So
we're not doing question and answer yet, but this is a good one at this time. So Andrew's asking, on a TM40, do you move the O-ring off as well? But the TM40 isn't as good on brittle paint, so when you move that off, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of your brittle paint handling,
True.
right?
True. Yeah. And one thing I should say is to incorporate this, what appears to be a small change, to incorporate this air skirt on the bolt, we had to extend the bolt stroke, which meant we had to change the body of the guns. So that was that required changing the vision circuits and the changing the breech length inside the body. So that's why people will ask at times, well, can I put that bolt in a TM40? Well, if you do, your bolt is going to extend out of the breech and actually go into your barrel. It's going to interfere with your barrel if you're below like a 6.8, 6.86, 6.88, I think, insert size.
Oh, wow, that's smaller than what I've been telling people.
Yeah.
And
your O-ring on the front of your bolt is also going to clip every time it kind of re-engages and comes back into.
Yeah, I'll bring up the screen, we'll show that. So what people were talking about. If you're ready, I'll bring up the screen now. Moorhead's saying that he prefers it at the outer position. What's up, Ryan? But yeah, you could do it. But what I was saying is, I think it's going to be better on the idle. I probably will do. I never did it on the TM40, but I'm gonna maybe try it on the idle.
Yeah,
because of the other things.
My TM40, when I played mech, I had the O-ring position back.
You did?
I found that when I would fan the trigger off the brake, when we're shooting off the brake, I would catch a ball and break a ball with the O-ring position in the forward position, and I moved it back, and it eliminated that. And I had a lot of our players on all A's doing it. It might not have happened with Ryan, but he's pulling triggers thousands of times every week. So
yeah, he's got triggers.
Most people aren't, especially us older guys that have been retired. So
I'm going to bring up the screen real quick. Let's try this here. Let's do it. All right. So you want to just go through them in order of how I have them? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So this is
that's another. That's one thing that's showing there is a change we made on the ASA. This was a big thing. All the guys would always ask about this, and we just we had time to fit it in with this design cycle. So the lever on a TM40 and an X didn't fully come forward. So when you would degas the gun, if you set it upright on a table, it would regas it up. Well, one thing a lot of people like to do is they degas their gun, set it upright. They want to pull out their bolt kit, clean it, grease it, whatever. Well, that didn't lend itself to that. They would have had to set the gun on its side. But as we know, when you go to these events, whether you're in an NXL and you're in the pits or you're at a 10-man event and you're sharing a picnic table, you don't have much table space. So you pretty much have to have your guns upright in between your gear bags. So the new design allows the lever to come fully forward 90 degrees so you can set the gun upright and it stays degassed. That was a big thing for a lot of people. It just makes it a lot easier to have your gun sitting upright, to top off your loader, remove your loader to clean it, whatever.
I think the bigger lever is easier to grab a hold of too, a little bit, especially if you're wearing gloves.
It is. Yeah, we did increase the size of the lever. So you can get your finger on this one easier. It's not like you're pushing your finger into a point as much. So.
All right, here's the next one. That's basically the ASA, Adrenaline ASA slide rail set screw, pretty much, right?
Right. So your ASA has your frame design, and ASA has a drop rail, and what it does is it gives your ASA an adjustable position. So basically, you can adjust the position of your ASA, and there's a locking screw that you see there, the access hole, to lock it down into the position that you choose.
Let's see what the next one. I think the next one. This This is
That
again one
shows
of
the
ours.
changes we made on the ASA design. So we're doing a double O-ring seal on the nut in the back of the ASA where your pin comes through and seals. And we went from a linkage arm on the front to a cam design. It's a simplified design, and it just makes it more robust and easier for.
So it's the shape of this. That I guess it's the cam that
Yeah.
you can see how it pushes it in, and when it rests here, when in the resting position where it's flat, it matches, I guess, what the pin or whatever you want to call it, the pin head.
Yeah. Once it's fully locked down, that flat
It'd be in
surface
that
will
spot, that
will
resting
lock in
position.
with the.
It's a great
pin.
design.
Yeah.
Removing that whole linkage arm that bent sometimes. It's great.
I remember you asked for this on your last model. We just didn't have time to really get to that. But
I told
you
Ryan that
had
at the
an idea
players
for some
party.
concept, and
I said I asked for that a long time ago. It was one of our #1 requests. So, but we did not come up with this. This is great stuff. This is your all's engineering. That's amazing. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, that's just showing it the ASA. Well, that's ours.
So that's the rearward position of your ASA when it's at the fully rearward position. Now, that one thing I mentioned to you earlier, James, that image there might make it appear like your gun has a very tall drop rail added on, and the drop rail, I believe, is roughly a 1/2 inch in height, but we didn't want to add that full 1/2 inch of height. So what we did was we reduced the height of your ASA so that the total height added with your ASA and drop rail combined, I think was 3/8 of an inch.
Yeah, I thought it was closer to
it was a
quarter,
minor amount. It's not enough where you're going to. I think most people would even notice. And if you didn't like any additional height at all, you would have the ability to put a standard idle ASA on there and bypass the drop rail altogether.
And I've told people you could put this on a stock idle, and we'll make some dust black ones, but you could
Correct.
not put this on a TM40 or a Shocker Era.
Yep. Yeah, I imagine some guys aren't going to want to use the bottle extenders that are common with some people.
I mean,
Ryan was mentioning to me today that there's a new bottle. If he's still
the HK bottle, it's like tiny. I mean, it's a 77.
It's almost like the old 68 bottles in terms of length. So
it
Ryan,
is. It is like the old 68.
Remind me what bottle that was you had.
It was an HK.
It's an HK bottle.
It's an HK bottle.
By HK, so
but I've heard that's the trend. So good thing we have the slide rail, so you can bring it back because Sam actually had, I think he had an 80 cubic inch and then the new 77, and it was. But now that was an 88 to a 77. It was probably 3 inches different. It was night and day. Mm-hmm. So the point is the bottles are getting shorter. So things like this could be beneficial if you want to adjust it back out.
So
you want to start here? This is in the forward position. You want me to go where to the rearward position? Where do you want to start?
So that's the firing position. That's the one that kind of really shows the difference between an idle body versus a TM40 body.
Yeah, and this shows what Moorhead was telling people, and you just said it about why you shouldn't use like our bolt kit in a TM40. You want to talk about that? Because that right there.
You can see that front bolt seal is right at the edge of that breech, and that breech is extended. An idle body was changed by pulling the feed tube rearward and the bolt internals rearward. So the bolt internals for an idle are shorter than they were what they are on a TM40. So you can't fit a TM40 bolt assembly into an idle, and you can't put a you can't put a idle bolt assembly into a TM40.
And then explain to them what would happen if you bought our kit, which has the bolt guide extension, the can, and the bolt. What would explain to them what would happen if you tried to put all that in a TM40?
Into a TM40?
Yeah, like with this O-ring would go into the barrel, basically.
Right. So, like I said, you're what we call the SFT O-ring. The front seal on your bolt would be going out of the actual breech itself and then re-entering as it returned for every shot. And whenever you're at the end of that shot cycle, the back pressure of the ball swells up that O-ring to seal. So that O-ring normally goes through the entire breech without interfering with the breech. It's undersized. But at the end of the shot cycle, the back pressure swells that O-ring out to make a seal for a moment. And if you put this bolt in a prior model gun, it's going to clip on the front edge of that breech because it's exiting it and then re-entering.
Right. It's going to, so on a TM40, this O-ring right here would be about what, like here, right?
Yeah, it would be extended out like 80 thou. So,
and Ryan made a post about that. So if you have a 6, 7, 8 or something, it's basically going to be hitting your insert.
And not only that, you would be losing your seal. So you'd be getting blowback. You would be getting blowback.
And I think you mentioned this. This O-ring could also get stuck or get caught on the return stroke, right, and come off.
We never had it come off, but
or at least create drag. Then how about that?
But it does wear on it. It definitely wears the O-ring. So.
Go to the next one.
Oh, the other thing too, I completely forgot.
This is in a rearward position.
The bolt's not going to retract far enough for a ball to drop into your feed tube. I forgot about that. So.
Yeah, well, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So here it is, and this shows the bolt guide extension. You want to talk about this? Is this the good one to show, like, basically the resting?
So yeah, so your bolt guide extension is a lot beefier than our stock one. That was done.
That's this piece. If you don't know what that is.
So what that does is minimizes the empty volume and air during the shot cycle, so that the air.
So this is the empty volume. So if you don't know what we're looking at here, this is the bolt here. This is our kind of tapered Bernoulli kind of concept here with this bolt, and this is the bolt guide extension he's talking about.
Yeah. So the bolt guide extension basically minimizes the volume that the air has to fill as it's traveling through that section, and then the inner taper of your bolt design, the nozzling that we did per se, that allowed us to increase the surface that contacts the ball, that pushes the ball during the shot cycle. So
let me show that real quick. I think we have that here. Oh, sorry, right here.
So you can see the blue section, the bottom picture is a front-on look at the TM40 bolt, and the blue circle is the contact point for the ball with that.
What touches the ball on a TM40.
And your bolt above, you can see that.
And this is the spool that we're looking back through it.
Yeah, there's no bolt guide extension, so you're seeing the front of the spool.
So this is what, for a mech, if you had rollback, like there was nothing to keep it from rolling back. Sorry,
right. So the bolt guide extension is a way to control the ball stack, prevent rollback. The ball stack holding it perfectly vertical is it's a big advantage for mech, because if the first ball rolls back into your bolt, whenever the bolt cycles, the bolt is going to interact more with the second ball in the breech, and it's going to bobble it up the feed tube.
Yeah, it's going the wrong way.
In electronic guns, you have eyes. They're not going to allow the gun to fire until that second ball drops back down in the breech and is settled. But in mech, any delay or counter to that drop of the second ball is just more chance you're going to pinch and chop. So if the ball stacks are held perfectly vertical, the bolt interacts very little with the second ball in the breech, and you get less bobble on the second ball. So now paint varies in size, and it's the shape of it is never truly round, and some of them are just almost egg shaped. But so your bolt is always going to interact some with the second ball in the breech, but the more you minimize that, the better feeding you're going to get in mech operation.
And then all the aftermarket bolts,
it still helps because it also reduces the effect the bolt can have on the second ball in the breech in terms of damaging the shell before the next shot. So all around,
on the aftermarket bolts that were created for on the TM40 to prevent rollback, basically now the bolt isn't even touching the ball, right? It's this piece here, the bolt guide extension.
Right, the ball's resting
that's what's
against
touching
the bolt guide
in the resting spot. That's what's touching the ball, this piece, which doesn't even move.
And then during the shot cycle, the increased surface of your bolt, those I'll call it pads, that's pushing with over a larger surface, so it spreads out the force as that bolt starts pushing forward. You can see there's several vent slots. That's two things. There's two reasons for that. One is flow. So we're necking in, but we still have flow. Two is weight reduction. And three, we always have to make sure we don't make a seal on the ball. So if a ball is perfectly round and it's humid and it's soft, if your bolt face creates a seal when it pushes forward on that ball, it will actually suck the ball and break it during the shot cycle. So there's 3 things there that come into play with the shape of that bolt face.
Yeah, that I never even thought about it until you mentioned it a long time ago about the seal and making a suction cup. That makes complete sense. And then creating that air.
It's pretty rare that can happen, but when it does, you're going to be breaking paint.
Better to plan for it.
No idea why.
Okay, so you want to talk about the the holes in the flanges here then, since this is basically another forward stroke, but
well, that's mid-cycle. That's just about the point when the bolt's about to release off of the front O-ring on the bolt guide, and that would be the firing point. That's when it's going to start to release.
Yeah. So let me back up. So a lot of people don't know. They know when they pull the bolt tail, air comes out, but they don't know where air's at and where the path it goes. Why don't you just talk about that? Like, where air's coming from? Some people I guarantee you, some people think the air comes from right here.
Yeah. So the section view of that isn't accurate. So the spool in that image should be pulled rearward. So the front O-ring on the spool would be pulled rearward into that bore right behind it, right there. Yeah. It would be pulled rearward about, say, 1/8 of an inch right there. It would be sealed off. The second O-ring back on the spool right there would be open, allowing the chamber to be dumping air into the bolt guide. And you can see on the lower portion of the bolt guide, you can see the channel.
Right here.
No. Forward. Right there.
Yeah.
That's one of the flow channels. This section view, it cuts it off because there's three. Yeah,
there's another one over here.
So you're only seeing one of them sections. So that port right there, there's 3 of them. And that's where the air is going to release out of the bolt guide and hit on the back of the bolt. And right where the bolt's at right now, it's going to start releasing air coming out of the air chamber to go off that front seal, which is going to lead out the bolt and down the barrel.
But like on a TM40,
the air skirt there is going to control the initial release of that air. And that's what gives us that softer initial release to get a softer initial push on the ball.
So like on the TM40, when this was solid, it may not start to release at that point, but with these, with the holes on the stock idle or the flutes with ours, it starts, that's what this red area is, it starts to slow the release. I talked about that in our
So whereas the TM40 and RX, it was an instantaneous release. It was just it was going to full open almost instantly. So you were getting
so the air would be here, and then as it goes forward, it drops down around both sides.
Yeah.
Really
so it was getting a very quick pop or release on the ball.
And so that's what the holes do on the stock idle, and then the flutes on ours.
And that skirt design is also what allows us to use a softer O-ring on the front of that bolt guide extension as well. So it doesn't, it allows air to stabilize on both sides of that seal so we don't get it blowing off. So our release was so quick on a TM40 and an X that we had to use a harder durometer O-ring on there. So because if we didn't, the O-ring would eventually sometimes blow off.
So what he's saying is basically when you have some of this hole on one side of the O-ring and some on the other, it keeps the O-ring in position versus trying to blow it off, right?
Yeah, allows it to kind of balance or equalize on both sides of the O-ring. So
trigger, and you can see that wall there.
We showed the trick. Okay, so yeah, you can see the red arm, this red switch there. Okay, that metal part, the metal arm of the electronic trigger switch. You can see, I should have had an image of the stock switch, but a stock, traditional, I should say traditional, because everybody's using a switch like this, a lever switch like this. A traditional lever switch, the arm only goes up as high as the body of the switch. So if you over travel, your switch arm bottoms out on the body of the switch, and then at that point, any more force, you're putting all that force into the body of the switch, and they're not that durable. So by extending that arm up higher, like I said, we get more leverage, and also if you follow that travel back right there against that metal back wall, so you're just going to bottom out, and that's it. And
that's a big improvement. That was a lot of boards. I'm sure that happened to.
Yeah. And the top of the trigger, you can see the top set screw in the front we doubled the length of the threads in there so you can adjust that to a much lighter position than you could before, where previously some players would just remove the screw altogether. But the problem there is you lose all return force. And there's a balance there. You need some magnetic return force, or else your trigger can really just start bouncing and kind of running on. Nowadays, I don't think anybody really ever checks for that. But in semi-automatic, that's important. You got to have some return force on that trigger, or you can get some just run on with the trigger bouncing from the shot cycle.
I forgot to mention the return. Like basically,
so actually, James, if you go back one image too, so I should have mentioned earlier. So some of you guys probably know Ryan Moorhead has came on board with us full time this past year, and he works a lot with go back to the trigger design. So you can see, this was a big change for us. We went to more of a Sith style trigger. So, and there was, just something like that, the profile of that trigger. There's a lot of, back and forth that goes into getting something that feels just right. And
I'll announce it now. I am getting some stock idle triggers, and then we'll be able to send them. If you want the Sith style, you can add it on, and you'll get the adrenaline trigger and the Sith, and they'll both be anodized to match. I'm going to be talking about that in a few weeks.
Yeah. So
sorry, go ahead.
Anyways, I was just going to say, we have Ryan here full time, and he gets to work on a lot of that kind of stuff with our trigger shapes and a lot of feedback on the shaping of that to get that just right. We put a lot of effort into things like that. We've had a blade trigger for probably longer than we should have. It was a big thing to change to a Sith style. We've done it for some private labels, but for us to switch our stock trigger to a Sith style, that was quite a departure. So, but the feels really good. It's really easy to keep that thing walking the trigger with in semi. So it's a noticeable improvement, and everything with that, the combination of the trigger shape, the adjustment, the increased adjustment range on the magnet tension and the lever switch. You pick this gun up and cycle this trigger compared to a TM40 in our prior models. It's noticeable. It's a noticeably lighter trigger. So
it is thinner. So like someone said, well, I put lightning bolts if we anodize the stock trigger. Ours is designed to accommodate that. It's a little wider at that spot where this one's not. So I don't think I'll have the room, honestly. I'll look at it, but our laser can be pretty precise, but it's just pretty small.
This section view, you're seeing the middle point of that trigger where it's got most of its meat. The outer edges, you'd have a tiny lightning bolt. So
yeah, it'd be tiny. So probably the answer is no.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was saying earlier when we talked about kind of the whole stroke concept, we didn't talk about, like I said, the return. You want to talk about that, where ours is a little smaller on the bolt guide extension and kind of how that works?
Oh, the backflow hole. Yeah, the backflow hole. That center hole in there. Yeah, yours is neck down. So so let
me just say this: we stopped where the bolt was right at the edge. So at this point, it's forward. The air is coming kind of around this waterfall, and it's going through the bolt into the barrel. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and then the back pressure of the shot forces air back up that hole that ultimately goes back through the spool and assists the spool to shut off, trap air in the chamber, and trap your air for efficiency. And it also starts the recock cycle of the bolt. So we tweak that whole size of yours to just tweak in the shot cycle a bit and soften the recoil speed and feel of the bolt. So that's why it's a smaller hole size than a stock bolt guide extension from a idle. So
here's the mech. So, we talked about this earlier.
Yeah. So there, your overlay there is a idle mech frame, or that's your mech frame.
Yeah, our mech frame in front.
Of your previous mech frame, and you can see the trigger guard position being shifted downwards, so you get that longer trigger. So more mechanical leverage, and like I said, keeps it legal because we're still 1.3 on that opening size. Not that Tom really ever checks that, but
I've had two adrenalines completely torn down like they were NASCAR One was Aaron Rios. You were at that event, and they thought he had an electronic gun. They
Yep.
made us bring it over afterwards. They completely tore it down. They asked what the timer was, if we had electronics going on, and he's screaming it's a timer. And another one when we came out with the TM40, they asked Craig to bring one over and completely disassemble it, and Craig did it. Jessica gave one to Craig, and Craig took it over and disassembled it for him, and they checked it as well. So I like it. I said, yeah, it's like I got my race car tore down, but it's legal.
Yeah. It's amazing some of the fire rates that some of those players hit. And the funny thing is, some of these guys never played mech. They only play electro. So you would almost think they would have lazy fingers because they're pulling an 80-gram trigger switch on electro guns all their playing career. And then they go back to mech, and they adapted pretty well. Some of them were really fast. Rios was crazy fast. I guess back then you guys were using force feed loaders. Were you using rotors on them?
I think I don't really remember what he had, but I remember that video had like 400,000 views because the ref is like, and what made the video great was the ref grabs the gun from him, right? And the ref's like, bang, bang, bang. And the other ref's like, go on, go fast. He's like, I'm trying. And then he's like, you do it. And Rios like walks away, like just rips on it again, like 16, 17 BPS. And he's just like laughing. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the greatest thing, but that's what's so great about mech. The gun, you can have the best gun in the world. If you're a slow shot, it doesn't matter. We could make the best mech gun in the world. Adam's only going to shoot 3 shots per second,
Carry 1 pod, so he's all right.
Right. It doesn't matter how fast we make that trigger. He's never going to fan that thing or walk it, So
let's see what the next one. I got some questions popping up. We'll get through those, but let me just see what else we have here. I think this is maybe the last. No, this is not the last one. Second to last one, but this is the core-to-core TM40 with R's over top, it looks like.
Yeah.
So you can see a lot going on. I mean, well, I don't know if people appreciate that there's a lot going on, but that's, like you said, small changes in pneumatics can make a big difference. I mean, that's a lot that was changed from the TM40 to the Idol.
Yep.
The main thing, I mean, for a mech standpoint, which eliminates all the used aftermarket bolts, is the bolt guide extension.
And there's a lot of little features here you won't even really notice. The entire bolt guide had to be redesigned for how we shifted the bolt for the increased stroke, the way we had a seal in the front can with it, and there was a lot of small detail stuff that had to go into this. We were prototyping this bolt for, oh my gosh, I mean, year and a half.
Well, I told her, man, we first met in November of 21, I think it was. I think it was November 21. We very first met, and you're like, hey, I'm starting on stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was early. That was early at that time.
And our test bed was really our 10-man mech guys. We really had the first iterations of this bolt kit.
You mean like these guys?
Yeah, like Frank. Yeah.
Who's your favorite player to play next to?
If I don't say Frank, he's going to kill me. So
yeah, he's far away right now. You're okay.
So our 10-man team was really the test bed. I mean, we got Ryan and those guys testing them later, but Heat guys, Heat's one of they're our number one sponsored team, but guys at that level, Heat and those guys, they're really not going to try something until you have it further along in development. They're just not going to want to take the risk. I've said
before, a lot of those guys, I mean, I know like some of the damage guys know about guns, but most pros don't even know about guns. Like obviously Ryan does, and Sam does.
They just want to.
They're great because they know Ryan knows everything about this, so he's perfect to test it. And
like I said, Ryan's been with us for almost a year right now, and I had him doing a lot of the internal testing. So we do a lot of, life cycling, the torture testing and stuff like that. Ryan's been involved with all of that. And so he's very familiar with everything that we're playing around with. And so he's always open for trying things out sooner than the other guys. And Ryan knows too, which guys he can throw stuff at. He's not going to take a chance with somebody that's going to throw a hissy fit if something, messes up during a game, even if it's a practice. So he'll hold back until we're further along. But I used to always tell Adam, I said, Adam, a big benefit of our 10-man team is I can throw anything on these guys. They'll try anything and they won't complain. They won't gripe. They all realize they're just lucky to be on the team and playing again. And, they're typically always open to try anything. So
especially if they think it'll give them
we're
advantage.
like the initial beta testers, and then eventually when
Yeah.
we get more
You want to talk
refined
about the
in,
posts
then we'll
here in
throw it out
blue?
to
That you
you
talked
guys.
about these earlier, but now we got a graphic. This is the ASA post and the body post.
Yeah, so that's the double O-ring post design. This was actually an idea from Russell. You guys all know Russell, so this was Russell's idea. This is a recommendation he had. I got to give him credit. And this was a big improvement for the durability of these seals, which are very critical seals. You have tank pressure on these seals, so if you're a high output tank, you're 850. Well, well, I won't throw any names out, but most tanks, if they're high output, you're getting up close to 1,000 before they actually regulate and shut off. So they're seeing a lot of pressure, a lot of stress on the seals. So this double O-ring design, one, gave us a stronger seal design, stronger material, and we eliminated Loctite that used to be on the top post of the frame. So a big improvement here. Can't be overstated how much that is going to make a difference with the durability of the guns. Like I said, especially when you're taking a big fall into the ground with these things, that ASAs getting knocked loose was a common thing. And we have, 2 screws holding that thing to the frame, 2 1032 threads. It's not like
This
it's a
O-ring,
delicate
this area right here was
connection.
a pretty common problem, at least on our team. Like
Yeah.
especially the guys that are running and diving and all that. Like just as
And like I said, as soon as your frame connection would come loose, you would instantly have a leak. Where now, I think we can go almost a full turn and a half loose on the ASA screws, and you're still sealed.
So, is there any screens left in the gun? Let's say you're at a field that has like not clean air. So I know there used to be a screen here, right? And there was
A mesh
one here
filter. Yeah, we have
sometimes.
a stainless mesh filter. It's still in the bottom of the frame. It sits right above that blue double post. Yep,
Okay,
it
right
sits
here.
right up in there. So it's removable, replaceable. Yeah, we always have filters.
Okay.
Sometimes they're hidden and unnoticed by most people, but we have
It's there.
multiple filters in the gun. Yeah.
think
Solenoids are sensitive to contamination, so you
that's
have
the
to
same
filter.
thing there, right? I think we're
That is
people.
showing your mech frame with your drop rail and that air routing that really isn't necessary to discuss further. But
Okay, so I think that's it for all the pictures. So we could dive into
yeah,
question and answer. There was a lot of question and answers that came up along the way. So you've got Hans here. We'll let him rip and see whatever
I'm
we
not
got.
seeing the comments, so I guess you're gonna have to.
So on your tab, I can bring them on, but do you not see the comments tab on the
Yep, hold
screen?
on.
You could click it. But I'll bring some on. And if you typed one earlier, and we missed it earlier, just feel free to type it again. I mean, they're coming in fast.
Oh, there we go. They just filled in.
So any tweak in the operating pressure, the new flow pattern. I mean, that the changes in the flow and the bolt and everything is kind of at the very end of it, right? You're talking going from 110 to 95 or something, which is not really, or whatever it's going to be. It's not a change in the tank reg, I don't think, right? You're still thinking around what, 450, something like that?
So in the past, we used to recommend above 550 for a strictly mech setup. And we tried to tell people not to go over 650. That was mainly because of the seal design between the frame and ASA, and mainly the frame and the body. The top post seal that we used to have on our gun before, right here, had a thinner O-ring with a different material. These are much more durable, and you can use a high pressure tank all day long. It's not going to be a problem. Obviously, if you have a lower output tank, it's less stress on that seal. It can last longer. The thing that most people don't realize is that if you're using a high output tank, 850 output, those tanks climb in pressure. They almost all do. I would get a lot of the tank regs back from my guys off the team. I used to get tons of specials because, like I said, I'm not going to throw out brand names, but Spesh had this one particular tank rig that he loved, and he used to have 3 or 4 of them, and they would climb in pressure so bad So it was not uncommon at all to have over 1,000 psi coming out of your tank and on those seals. So
Yeah,
these ones can handle it, but obviously you're going to have a longer life if you're using a mid-pressure tank. But a mid-pressure tank is good enough. The only thing a higher pressure one gets you is you can go longer without maybe greasing your tank reg, which most people don't do. In the mech world, I think they just aren't as aware of that. But you do have to maintain those tank regs. You need to grease them at least once a season. And if you're playing in a southern, like Florida, they get a lot of the humidity and salt in the air, and that builds up and makes a really bad powder in the tanks. Frank's frame, actually, it was funny, down at Cup one year, Frank's gun wouldn't gas up, completely wouldn't gas up. Took it apart, and his filter in the bottom of his frame was completely packed full with this white powder. And then we had to drill the port out in his frame. It was completely clogged up with this white powder. So the guys in Florida get it really bad because of the moisture and salt in the air, and two, a lot of the fields down there remove the moisture filters off their compressor because they're just filling up too fast. So that's why when you're playing in Florida a lot and you're shooting, you see the cloud. That's the moisture that wasn't filtered out of the compressor on the front end where it should have been done.
Do you want to talk about the two finger nubbins on the Idol versus TM40? Someone said, there's no rubber foregrips. I know on the TM40 and prior ones, everyone tend to wrap theirs. Ours is, of course, way thicker because of the cocker threads. So I don't, it's already pretty thick. But I think one of the concepts of the two extended nubbins is to give a little more serious grip.
Yeah. So so you can see on the Zach has grip tape on his there. So well, first off, let me explain that anywhere we can, we do metal. We're just trying to give the customer, the best value for
custom stuff. I love it. It means it's matching.
So we have machined in grip texture on these parts, but and sometimes guys will put on grip tape that's it's kind of like a hockey stick, and things like that. So we try to have a metal surface because this is going to be longer lasting and durable over the life of the gun. And you have the option to put on something over top of it if you want. But yeah, we've always been big on metal parts. It just the quality we're giving you. The perfect examples is backstrap. That could be plastic. It very easily could have been. But this thing, because it's metal, we were able to make it much thinner and keep a very sturdy design, which keeps this back profile nice and thin and small for a really slim grip feel. Now, if somebody wants to get a bigger one, they can, like I said, we can have different backstrap designs in the future. But ever since the first Luxe, we focused so much on the design of this gun, the ergonomics of this gun, and every iteration, as we added features and as we made improvements, one thing I always said to our one design engineer that's worked on this model every iteration, I said every time we added something, I'd always say, don't compromise on the ergonomics. Don't make it fatter, don't make it heavier, don't add anything unless you absolutely have to. And he's done an amazing job of keeping the original ergonomics and shape profile that we loved from the beginning. Now, we've made some tweaks lately. And that's where, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of these things, Ryan's had a lot of input on this stuff. The grip texture, the shaping of the reg cover up here, removing that top finger, that was Ryan's idea there. And, all these little things, I gave Ryan a lot of freedom on, the direction we went with these things to, really give the best feel we could. So we know that's very important. And we also feel it's very important that we're giving you the best quality, and I think it's hard to argue metal versus plastic or rubber. Obviously, the rubber grip itself, the way that wraps around everything, that pretty much is just meant to be rubber. But, we like these other parts to be metal, and, we do shape them so that you have locating features or grip designed in. So, and
for, like I said, for a custom anodized gun, it looks better.
Different,
I think,
machining and different feel as well. So
this is something people ask a lot. What's the reason for using the flex ribbon eye system instead of some of the alternatives that some of the competitors use?
Okay, so first off, one, I want to point out, flex ribbons are considerably more expensive than wires. That's why we use wired eyes in the shocker. That's the cheaper route. I mean, by no means are we doing this to cut costs. Flex ribbons are considerably more expensive. Flex ribbons, the advantage to them is the way they are formed to fit into their pocket or routing. A flex ribbon is shaped. So one, it's the minimal thickness. A flex ribbon's less than half the thickness of wires, and it's formed to drop right in and match the pocket, the routing that you're designing it into. So it's easier assembly, and it's lower profile to allow you to either have more wall thickness in places for strength in the frame, or and trust me, when you're installing flex ribbons versus wired eyes, every design is different in terms of the body or the part that it's dropping into. But a flex ribbon typically is going to install easier because it's formed to the pocket or routing that it's designed to be in. So
yeah, I changed a lot of our shockers back in the day when we go to from an electronic tournament to a mech tournament. I definitely pinched over the course of that season probably 2 or 3 wires just from
wires are going to kind of bend and flex anywhere they can. If your length isn't perfect, then there's going to naturally be a bend and a the wires are going to kind of walk wherever they want. Now in the past, people used to like wired eyes because they felt they were easier to repair. If you say somebody tore a eye wire assembly in a gun, they felt they could rework it with a soldering iron and replace an eye sensor or something like that. You can still do that with flex ribbons. Flex ribbons, the component is just located on a little circuit board or a circuit board that's part of the flex ribbon. So you can still rework them with a soldering station. It's just slightly different versus soldering wires with leads on a sensor. So
this is an important question that someone noticed your Vortex jacket.
Oh yeah. So
do you hunt or just shoot for fun?
I'm big into guns, as any of my friends know. Yeah,
I
love real guns. So especially
I think it helps a lot bringing things like, we tried to do that with our SAS system, which is from the real gun industry. Like, sometimes you get ideas from, like you said, the backstrap. I mean, you get a lot of ideas from the.
I have a lot of pistols and ARs, and that's a big hobby of mine. So, and there's a lot to learn from that whole industry as well. There's some crossover.
A lot older industry.
Yeah.
So Peter asks, any challenges as far as handling smaller paint? Like, does it create any gun challenges as the paint gets smaller and smaller?
So I don't know of anybody that has a way of dynamically conforming the breech to size for smaller paint and just constantly changing. So when you get smaller paint, it's going to roll more in your breech, either whether you have a flat face bolt or we have our bolt guide extension to hold the bolt stack more vertical. Smaller paint is going to move more, and smaller paint is also going to increase how much your bolt interacts with the second ball in the ball stack. There's no two ways about it. And that's why things like your bolt speed and the shape of your bolt. So, a lot went into the shape of our bolt, this little, what I would call bull nose. The shaping of this nose up here and the O-ring being on there was to have a nice rounded surface there that was more gentle on interacting with that second ball in the breech. So that's one of those areas where, little details like that, the spring force on our detents, the shape of our detents, because, with smaller paint, sometimes your ball is going to get some speed before it engages with the detents. So our detents, if you'll notice, they have I don't know if you can see too well here, but they have a angled surface that the ball hits up against.
Yeah, that little.
It's not a straight 90. So, we have spring detents. I've always pushed for these. They're, we've been doing spring detents for for years. We've done rubber nubbin detents. The downsides of them are, one, the material eventually can take a memory and take a set. So if your bolt is in the forward position, it can compress those detents and form them in a depressed state almost, and paint rolls by. They add friction to the bolt cycle. So our detents, the shape of them, I think is just designed around a more gentle interface with the ball when it's coming by with speed. So, but yeah,
talked earlier
small
about
paint, you're going to have some ball roll in there. There's,
So you talked earlier about specials, Reg. Any recommendations on grease? I know for Powerhouse, they basically give you that clear oil. I don't even know what it is that they recommend.
Silicon grease.
Silicon grease.
That works really good. Yeah, it's just like a pure silicon. I can't think of the brand. I got some off of Carl one time at Powerhouse. Really good
The Powerhouse stuff is good. So
Powerhouse, their regs are awesome.
Yeah,
and
that grease is
awesome. Yeah, you can't go wrong with their stuff.
All right, so here's a question.
I believe it's like a pure silicon grease.
This is a good question. When are we getting an adrenaline impulse? Any idea of doing a poppet valve marker again?
You guessed that question was going to come up.
I did guess that question was going to come up.
It's funny because I've had that conversation with Billy I haven't had it for years, but in the past I'd always say, let's do it. Let's do an impulse design. Cause I started playing with a cocker. So a stack tube design, that's what was natural to me. I always liked stack tube designs, and my last year playing on OAs, I played with an impulse. So it sighted for me more naturally. When I first went to playing with an SFT shocker, it just took me a week or two to get used to it. It felt so small. But as you and I talked earlier, the reason for making a stack tube or poppet valve, I'll just say poppet valve. The reason for making a poppet valve has slowly waned over time. 10 years ago, the market was almost split 50-50. So if you were selling a poppet valve and a spool valve, half your teams were going to buy poppet valve and half were going to buy spool valve. Poppet valves had the efficiency and the reliability, durability. I mean, most of them you could just shoot and never even do maintenance on, and they were always going to work. Some guys preferred that over accuracy and shot feel and marker size. They just didn't want to have to think about their gun, and that was always an advantage. But over the past 10 years, spool valves have made strides in reliability and efficiency, and to the point where they're so close now, it's hard to really have a reason to make a poppet valve.
I think, like I said earlier, when I said this question may come up, it's people with nostalgia, and we have a lot of collectors. Yeah. So I think the adrenaline impulse would sell well, but you need to sell like 5,000 or 6,000 units, and I just don't know how many people out there are like, I think it's going to be inferior to the Idol for the reason you just said. So
yeah. I mean, for anything that we're going to do that's worthwhile, we have to sell thousands of them. And poppet valves, it's hard to have confidence you're going to sell thousands per year of a poppet valve.
So they say they love them. So you just need to make a list of commitment. Hey, I'll buy one, and give us a list of like 4,000 or 5,000 people, and we're set, right? And I'll buy 500.
Antonio was saying,
so Tyler,
impulse. That gun shot amazing. That was the first balanced valve we did in a poppet valve.
Which one?
And that thing could work at 50 psi on the RAM.
Which gun?
Remember? 09 Impulse.
Yeah.
So that was the first poppet
the JT
valve.
Impulse, right?
Balanced
Is that
valve.
the JT Impulse?
No, it was prior to that. 2009, we did a stack tube poppet valve gun, and that was the first one we did a balanced valve design. So the valve was very easy to open, and it allowed you to run your RAM down to like 50 psi, which was less than half what was typical at the time. So very, very smooth shooting gun.
Well, I know we can sell 5 because he's going to buy 3. Patrick will get at least 2 adrenalines. Chad, my partner, he'll shoot 1 for sure. So that's 6.
Yeah.
Idol, the trigger on the Idol compared to the Era, does it have the same stop design and the same wall and all that? How do they compare?
Same switch design. The machined metal back wall is slightly different in the frame just based on the layout and machining access, but it's hitting a metal back wall on both. Yeah.
Okay. Thoughts on rubber face bolt? I know this, but you talk. So
So the only thing we've always had a problem with, we've tried rubber face bolts. I don't have the prototypes here anymore. I think I've thrown them away. But the problem we always had with the rubber face bolt before was to make it beefy enough where it wouldn't shoot out of the bolt or tear apart. It restricted flow. It reduced velocity. So we never went with one. And trust me, I've played with one for a while. Spesh and myself both played with one for at least a season, trying them out. But our pressure was a little bit higher to do that. And that was the reason we just never wanted to do it. We did it at the time because it was a flat face bolt that was better for mech. And we were really just trying it out. And but the reason we didn't go with it was because for electronic, I always felt it was compromising the operating pressure. But yeah, we did do some prototypes. And to make them the flat face thin enough where it wouldn't restrict flow and affect velocity, they weren't holding up long term. So,
is there anything else you want to bring from the firearms industry to the paintball industry? I'll say one thing. I didn't think of it. Somebody showed me once. I think it was a tactical shotgun that the trigger had like all these adjustable rakes, not just rakes, like all kinds of different adjustments that. They said we need to bring this, to the next adrenaline.
which gun was that?
I can't. Nikki T sent it to me. So Nikki T said, "Look at this trigger." It was on some tactical. Honestly, I can't remember which one it was because it wasn't about the gun, but it was from an actual gun of some sort, and it was just adjustable in all kinds of different ways.
Huh.
Anything you could think of that would be cool to bring?
Well, first off, I'll mention my first kind of dive into ARs was where I got the idea for the ice coating on the ice bolts, the bolt assembly in the Luxe Ice. The bolt carrier groups with ARs, there's a lot of different coatings you can get. Back in the day, I tried the NP3 coating. The company's not around anymore.
But that is what SAS is modeled after. I said that when I released. Yeah. It's very similar. That company actually went, I don't know if they just do it for Blackwater and the government, but the company that did it is still there. They just don't offer it to the public anymore. So
I think it was just too expensive.
Yeah, I bet it's maybe Navy SEALs are getting
I had Billy's, one of the initial samples I had done was Billy had a 1911 and it was kind of beat up, and I had it coated with it, and it really made a difference. It felt really good. The slides.
I'll ask Brandon Unger, who's getting it these days. He's top secret clearance now. So,
so that's one thing that did cross over from the gun industry, the firearms industry, was that. In terms of other things, obviously the backstrap, because I had a Russell had a P30, an H&K P30 pistol. It felt amazing. So when Russell and I were getting into building an AR, he brought that pistol in to show me, and I loved it. And that's really where this came from. Prior to this, we did it on, some of you guys know we do the pellet guns as well, Scout, and we did the design on the pellet gun first, but that had the interchangeable palm swells and the backstrap. So palm swells, interchangeable palm swells.
So some of these people that make aftermarket accessory, I don't think we're going to make a custom. We've already made a custom backstrap. I don't think we're making big, little, and small, but you may see some companies out there that, try to make, different size backstraps.
Actually, something does come to mind. So recently, we did a design for I'm going to call it a moderator. I think you guys will know what it is, but it's moderator. We did a Tesla valve moderator for our pellet gun. It works amazing. And Billy,
I heard
it was
about
an idea Billy was talking about for a long time. And we got an amazing R&D guy in here, Luke, now with us, and he whipped one up in a day, and we've been testing that out, and we've been selling some now. We started selling them, and it makes a noticeable difference on the shot sound of the pellet gun. So that it was always something cool. Billy used to always talk about this Tesla valve, and we were just always, wondering how we could fit that in with something. And that I could see that as something that we might try to incorporate into a paintball barrel at some time. The problem with the paintball barrel is you can only go in this sport. We sight down our barrel, so your barrel diameter can only get so big. In other guns, that's not really a issue because your sights are typically not. You're not sighting down the barrel. You're using sights or a scope or something else. So, but that would be something neat. The things we're doing on there. Luke's done. This is the second moderator he's done. The one prior to this worked really good as well. So, so we're learning some things on moderators that might cross over someday. I would say that.
Yeah, people were talking about Luke and that. He just whipped that up, and it was like a game changer.
Oh yeah, he's quick. Luke's quick. Brilliant kid. And when you get Luke excited about something, he's on it. I mean, you just have to get him to believe or kind of buy into the idea, and he'll have something to show you within hours typically.
So this question, I think something's off on it basically, but why would the Idol get 900 rounds on a 68, 4,500, but an Air can get 1,200? They should be pretty similar. I think something's off on that. Probably.
So all of our efficiency testing we do on 77s, because that's kind of like the standard tank size now. And on a 77, you should get 12.5 pods. That's not counting the loader. That's just pods, 12.5 pods.
What is that, like 1,400 rounds, something like that?
1,450, something like that, I think. So, but the efficiency is very close between them. You just have a slightly lower operating pressure with a, I'm glad they brought this up. You have a slightly lower operating pressure with an Idol versus an Era, sorry. And that's because we have additional machining we do on the inside of a Idol body. You're not gonna be able to see it here.
Well,
I sent you a section view from before, James.
Yeah, let me.
We go in and hollow out the upper bore of this Luxe body to get us additional air volume. And that's one of these things where that's additional machining. And that's why we only do this on a Luxe and we don't do it on an Era.
Yeah, I had that picture before. Sorry, I can't find it now, but it showed where it was hollowed out more.
Yeah, and it's over probably, I don't know, a 3-inch length where we're doming the inside of our body to gain volume in there. So that's it's a lot of little things like that we do to, when we're doing a Luxe, we basically don't have our hands tied for any cost reasons. So we don't go crazy with aesthetics like on yours for a stock gun, but for the most part, we can do whatever we feel is going to improve the performance of the gun, the ergonomics, or the weight reduction. So, and it's things like that. We do a lot of little things like that. So
when you're coming out with a loader, I was at Summit. There's some new loaders coming out this year. Some of them people don't even know about. It's crazy. There's a lot of new loaders coming to the market. So
yeah. So
by World Cup, there'll be some new loaders out. I'm excited about one of them in particular.
I don't think, and this is really Adam's kind of stance on just being more neutral in the industry. I don't think we'll ever do a mask or a loader. And the reason being is because the big paint distributors, that's a main part of their product line that they're going to protect very aggressively. So you're pretty much getting into a price war or, for example, rental guns. Okay, we were in rental guns for a bit. It's a hard market to survive in when you have other companies giving the product away as long as you buy their paint, So, and it's the same way with mask and loaders. They're going to try and squeeze you out if you try squeezing into that market. We've been approached by people in the past, and there's a lot of patents around loaders. So it's not an easy thing to just jump into and not have to worry about a patent that you might conflict with. But no plans for it right now. We you know, our history shows we focus on guns. Guns and barrels is where we put all of our effort, and we're extremely busy. I mean, it's, you know, we're constantly, and now that we've expanded into pellet guns as well, it's, I mean, we have our hands full. There is, you know, the market we're in is very mature. I mean, there's the competition out there is really good. There's no doubt about it, you know, so you can't just, you know, rest on our laurels and think we're going to ride out a gun model for, you know, 5-10 years. You know, that's one thing I wish we could carry over from the gun industry. They can ride out gun models a lot longer than we do in the paintball world.
Well, I like it because I only get to sell a couple hundred guns per model, so I can't wait 6
Yeah.
years. So 3
Yeah.
years is about right.
But yeah, no, it's, you got to constantly be innovating and improving your design, or you're just not going to stay competitive. This market's, it's too good. The competition's too good. And if you don't, you're just going to be losing market share really fast.
And that's the same answer to this question, basically. Anything that, you know, like you said, you had, I mean, maybe not below, they're saying a new mid-end below the shocker, but you know, you tried some, I guess those were more entry level, what you had in the past that,
Yeah.
you know, so new to the Luxe, totally platform, anything they need to know to adjust to. I mean, it's very low maintenance. I've got guys on my team, you know who I'm talking about. They never clean their gun. They just, you know, they get it out and shoot it and then put it back away. You know, he's probably watching.
Yeah.
But
So I'll touch on that. And I see one comment I do want to point out some of the small things we changed in the barrel.
on the barrel. Okay. I'll go to that next.
So, the Idol's just, it's more user friendly than the TM40 was even. So, in terms of basic operation, you know, you're charging, you're just popping off the back strap and plug it in through the back. Or if you want to swap out the battery, it's that easy. So it really makes it a breeze for operating. Your bolt system, for the most part, like I said, the design changes we did in this bolt system allow you to go longer between grease cycles. So for the most part, all you're doing is greasing the 2 seals on your bolt guide, your main CL O-ring on the bolt, and your inner front can O-ring.
And you don't really have to go into
that
the
simple for the
spool,
most part. You don't have to get into your shuttle in the back.
What do you want to say, like 20
more
cases,
than
30?
Once a season, honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, now I know, you know, the damage guys, the worst state by far for paintball is Florida. That's,
Well, for those guys, 20 cases is a month anyway. So
what's that?
I said, some people say like 20 cases or so, but I said for those guys, they shoot so much. I mean, that's a month for them anyway, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're right. The sand.
If you're playing in clean conditions and you keep your big thing is if you keep your loader clean. If you're a snake player, you got a speed feed. You're diving into the snake. If you're playing in Florida, you're getting sand in your loader and it's going right down in the breech of your gun. You got to clean that every week, you know. Whereas if, let's say, you're a back guy and you're playing in the Northeast, you're playing in woods, you're playing on a lot of grass, you're not diving into bunkers, you're not getting sand and debris into the guts of the gun. I mean, you could, you know, you just grease that thing every other week or once a month. Your original O-rings will probably last more than 10 years easily. But in Florida, you're not going to get that kind of life out of the original O-rings if you're getting sand in there and not cleaning it out. So your playing conditions have a huge effect on how often your grease cycle is going to be and how often you have to clean the gun. You have a large control over that. You know, we used to have guys in our team that, oh God, I'm trying to think what his name was. Bryce, I can't remember your brother's name, but Bryce Rhodes plays for us, and his brother was crazy. He would go diving in and get branches in his loader, literally, and then he'd wonder why his loader wouldn't feed. It's like, seriously, you got to keep your stuff clean, you know. But you know, the front snake players, if you're playing in states like Florida, you're going to get a lot of crap in your gun, and you're going to have to clean it every day, or else you're going to be going through more O-rings and you're going to be wearing out parts. And the only part you're going to wear out is your bolt and your front can. So not like it's that much that's really going to get damaged. But for the most part, these parts will last the life of the gun. They'll last past the life of you if you just do routine maintenance. They don't. The bolt rides on O-rings. We don't have metal on metal contact and wear points. So for the most part, it's O-rings. We life cycle. So every bolt design will typically go 1 million cycles before we go into production with something. So 1 million cycles means no part breakage, nothing breaks in half or.
I showed him a factory tour video, your cycle machine, how cool it was, and it was just ripping on a gun. Yeah. That's so cool because it could go through 1 million pretty fast.
Yeah. And that's one thing I used to see. So in the past, this kind of goes back to that whole poppet valve, spool valve argument. So in the past, spool valves used to have a longer bolt, more O-ring seals. So O-rings are like tires, they're friction, they're gripping. So you used to be able to go about 30 to 50,000 cycles before you'd have to re-grease a spool valve to keep it going for life cycling. Poppet valves, you could just run forever. You wouldn't even have to grease them. You just took it out, looked at the gun, make sure nothing broke, hook it back up and keep going, come back in another 2 hours and check it again. Spool valves now can pretty much almost go as long as a poppet valve in that regard. Eventually the O-rings will run dry and you will start to wear the O-rings, but we don't get part breakage though.
So lots of, by the way, also before we move on to the barrel, you said in Florida, the things that would lead to deterioration and problems was the bolt and the can. And that's the reason, those are the only two parts that we do the WS2 coating on, which is a dry lubricant to try to, help with, for those especially who don't do a lot of maintenance. So we're having lots of people that ask different barrel things, barrel threads, just talk in general about the idle barrel and how you've changed the shrouding, probably how it's easier to get on and off. Because so a lot of our adrenaline shocker customers, when we made the adrenaline Luxe, that was their first Luxe. And I would say 9 out of 10 first 2 months tech calls was, I can't get my barrel on. You sent me the bad barrel, and I'd do a live video and show them how to do it. But that's fixed on your alls.
Yeah. So it's a double lead thread, which means it has 2 start points on this thread. And we did tweak the machining on that just to make it easier to start that thread in. Some of the guns before, the lead in was a little more rough to get it started. And also another change we made was the reg cover on the idle does not break up into the barrel bore up here. The TM40 it did. And the problem we would have is some people would crank this reg nut so tight they would drive the front post, the top post, and the reg cover, the retaining post, up into this barrel bore, and it would interfere with the barrel. So we no longer have that breaking into the barrel bore. We used to have an O-ring inside of here because of this 2-piece design, just to make sure it was definitely sealed. It was probably overkill and not really necessary, but we did it just to be safe. Some users, when they would dry fire the gun and hold their hand over like this, it would blow that O-ring out. And if they did, they would lose some velocity. So we eliminated that seal. Now, it's just an O-ring on the back of the barrel just to prevent it from coming loose. And even if it does, you're not losing any seal. You're not losing any velocity. The barrel back, we don't have any cut throughs. This was Ryan influence there. We eliminated cut throughs. So when you're playing in states like Florida, you don't get sand in there that you have to clean out. We reduced the ID size of the barrel front just to match better with smaller paint nowadays. And we reduced the porting size in the barrel front. So threads, barrel back holes, porting, ID size, that was some of the changes on the barrel.
And when you say threads, because there's a question here, is the adrenaline and the stock cocker thread or just adrenaline? The answer is that is still ion threads or Luxe threads, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
And ours is
I can tell you, we will never go away from this thread. This thread allows us to make our body shorter because of just less barrel past those threads. It's because of this original design and the overall length of the barrel back.
It's a dramatic.
Allows us
it's crazy. I'll show you. I have it here.
And it's quicker to take on and off, and it's a more robust thread. This is more kind of like, I'd say, like a an Acme thread where it's a thicker, more robust thread.
So you can see how much longer the body is, like to do a cocker thread, like, you know, so this is a stock idle superimposed over to the Adrenaline idle. As you can see, we got it way out here. So so you can see the difference in the grip. And it's a significant difference. It's, what is it?
Yeah,
It's
it
about a half
changes that
inch.
front angle. You're almost like 90 degrees on your foregrip, where
Yeah,
you
it
can see
is.
we have
I
a
think it is
slightly,
90 degrees.
I think we're a 5-degree rearward slant. So
yeah. So the bottom is the same, but it's much thicker at the top. But what is it? Do you know the difference between the threads? Is it 5/8 inch, something like that?
I think it was 3/8. I think it was
3/8.
3/8
Okay, I
additional
know it was one
length.
of the something with an eighth. So. But yeah, it makes it way longer.
Yeah. So it allows us to keep the body shorter, and we just feel it's a better thread. And if we were giving a cheap stock barrel, there's reason to upgrade, but we feel there's no reason to upgrade away from this barrel. You have our freak inserts, which gives you all the sizing for that's one of the most important things with paint is bore sizing. We've had that since day one. Obviously, we invented that. So.
Someone asked, what made you just choose big bore and small bore is what comes with the stock versus like labeling it, 688 or whatever.
Okay, so that's a good question, Derek. So there's times when you have to use big bore. Okay, so examples of that, you can have paint that's generally, let's say, 689 in size. Sometimes you can get paint that has some balls in the case that are more egg-shaped. We get paint, some of them that measure up to 710 in size. Crazy big. When you're measuring on the widest poles of that ball, and like I said, they looks egg-shaped. That's really down to poor quality of the paint manufacturer. I've been told that that's the ends of the ribbons when they're adjusting the tension on the ribbon that feeds into the machine that typically is corrected, and they normally shouldn't be putting out paint like that, but some do. With the demand of paint over the past couple of years, a lot of them were just struggling to keep up, and I'm sure more stuff went out that normally would have. QC would have probably pulled a lot of this stuff. But anyways, when you have to really size for your biggest paint, and if you're getting egg-shaped balls that are 693, you kind of have to go with 693 unless that ball is really tough and it's going to shoot through a tighter bore and not break. The advantage to bore sizing your barrel for your paint is you lower the operating pressure of your gun. It's going to have a better feel, a better sound, better air efficiency, all around an improvement. So anytime you can bore size your barrel smaller for paint, if you're familiar with the way a gun sounds and shoots, and knowing when it sounds good and not so great, it's very noticeable. There's lots
do you
of
know
guns to where we're shooting 682, and that's not even tight on the ball. That's just safely sized down to where we're not over squeezing on it.
Yeah. So ours stock is going to come with 686, and ours go every two. There's no odd numbers. It's 678, and then every two up. Do you know what the stock idle? What
688? I think it's 688.
That's what I thought. The bigger one was 688, and you know what the other one is? 684, maybe.
We used to be 687, and now we're 688. This is the part I think of the least because we've had two insert sizes in this thing, and I typically just don't have to think about it. 688, and I think 684. No, that's what I was thinking. I could be wrong. Maybe 693.
I mean, they're not labeled, but that's
what I don't know this.
They equate to two sizes in the freak set. I guess is my point. So I think it's
693 and
so
687.
Here we go. Here we go. We got the answer.
There we go.
688.
682. Okay. So you have the small insert for really small paint, which is very common, and an 8.8, which is, it used to be your mid size. Now it's almost like your mid large. We used to ship guns with 693 for the longest time. And now that's so overboard, your gun would sound like crap if that was the only insert you had in with it. But we've had events in the past year where we've sold out of 695 inserts at one time because some of the paint manufacturers showed up with paint that was that large. and guys, and not just our gun, other gun teams using other guns had to come by our inserts just to be able to get the paint out without breaking it. So it doesn't happen that often, but what happens if you don't have a large insert, you're going to have trouble.
So we're underboring, like we're with the SAS set. And thank you, Jeff. We're basically we're matching it up and then going down 2 sizes. And I'm sending Ryan one out tomorrow, so he's going to be playing with one a little bit.
Well, you can go a bit tighter because your friction's lower with your coating.
So. Yeah, I'm not recommending that for the stock. I'm just saying that's what we're seeing is. I've got a guy, he says, if you can blow it out and you can barely get it out with a swab, go down a size. So he just keeps going till it's like hard to get out with a swab.
He must have been playing paintball in the 90s because people nowadays don't seem to care about that.
They don't bore sizing. I agree.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Now, I do have a guy, though.
I used to see so many guys pick an insert based on the color and how it contrasted with their gun.
Right. Crazy. I do have a guy that he has our whole set and he uses 6, 7, 8 for everything. And it actually shoots it, but I don't recommend that either. But anyway, I'm sending Ryan one out tomorrow, so you guys will have one to play around with up there pretty soon. Let's see. Yes, you're welcome. I can't wait till you get it either. So I want to say, I mean, we don't know the full numbers yet, but I want to say there's going to be a little bit difference in operating pressure because of the ability to turn down the velocity. We just talked about the SAS. So by underboring, I found that it increases velocity, so you can lower the reg a little bit, which just that makes sense, right? And then
and your results are going to vary from case to case, paint to paint. I mean, that's kind of hard. That's hard to put to state a value for. But yeah, the tighter you can size your bore down, you're going to gain efficiency, and you're going to lower your pressure. The gun
and it helps with. I found like consistency on the chrono. I found because of you don't have those air gaps on the bad balls. You know what I mean? Right. Like it's more consistent seal around the ball.
Right.
But yes, sir, you guys will have a set up there soon. You're welcome. I'm excited for him to try it out. And like you said, he's one of those pros that knows his stuff. So, so we're not going to be, again, so I am making a custom back strap, but I'm not making like other back straps. So if someone had one, it would, unfortunately, it'd have to be done before we send it off to anodizing. I don't think anybody's making one yet. So you'd have to, if you got one down the road, you'd have to send it off and, send it to
This
someone
is
like
one of those parts. Russell always gets approached by people with 3D printers wanting to make their own parts. And we'll share this file.
Well, that's great. There you go, folks.
But this is one of those parts. We just got a new 3D printer recently, and the print resolution is just amazing. And you could probably you might be able to get away with 3D printing this and doing a unique grip texture and stuff like that. It's something that people might be able to experiment with, at the very least, just to prove a different shape, and test it out before you would go into machining.
Well, 3D printers are cool, right? So I guarantee you start sharing that file, people will start making all kinds of different back straps. That's cool.
Yeah.
So inserts where we saw original when we were messing with the SAS on some of ours wearing. What you know about that with different, way we're doing it and the different materials. But with our stuff, at least, it's part of the electroless nickel coat, it's part of the electroless nickel plating. So it's actually part of the barrel insert. Now, others that, sometimes people will, what do? They dip or what? You could send your inserts off and they'll be coated, but that's more of a temporary, thing. I don't know what the procedure is there, but I know that's not supposed to last forever. And that's probably what they're talking about is if you get some of these companies are offering the dips or whatever, that's not going to be a permanent solution. But ours is part of the electroless nickel plating. So it's essentially part of the barrel itself.
I see Peter's comment there, and I think what he might be referring to, that makes a lot of sense for somebody who's playing in states on fields with sand. If you get sand in your barrel, it 100% will scratch the inside of your barrel. Yeah. That's why we're doing the stainless inserts with the nitride coating. We do some of them for Infamous and that. It's just even a harder surface and a harder surface coating. Now, not a coating, but a heat temper. So it's a more scratch resistant material. Now that adds weight. It's a stainless insert. So some people might not like it, but that gives you an option. But yeah, Peter, in terms of your comment, where somebody's saying use different insert kit for practice, I would recommend using maybe a different insert kit when you're playing in a field where you're playing on sand, because your inserts are going to get more scratches in them if you're playing in sand and getting sand in your barrel, which these X-ball teams in that do. Like I said, it gets in their loader, it goes through the breech, and it definitely is going to go down your barrel, and you will get scratches from it. Shoving your squeegee down, yeah, sand is definitely going to scratch your inserts in your barrel. So there is truth to that.
And that's what he's saying. He's talking about regular aluminum inserts. So
Yeah.
again, it sounds like we're harping on Florida, but I mean, it's so.
Hey,
I mean,
that's been my test date for years,
right?
You know?
I mean, you and Ryan knock stuff out, then you send it down to the damage guys and like, hey, go play with this.
Send it down to Jason and
and the Edwards
Jason
guys say, oh,
Jacob,
it works or it doesn't work.
You'll find out. You'll find out how you hold up in worst case scenario. That's for sure. So,
and that's someone just answered this. Andrew answered it. Yeah. So we tried stainless, and that the electroless nickel with the Teflon is so hard to apply that it just didn't work out. And aluminum was way more rock solid. So that is the answer. It's aluminum, but you're not really having aluminum, so to speak. The aluminum surface is not touching the ball. It's the electroless nickel that's touching the ball.
Yeah.
Pulling the bolt out if it's been sitting a while, is that the same experience?
Say that again.
He says for him personally, he's had some times where pull the bolt tail and pull it out.
Oh.
If it's been sitting a while, it can have some resistance. Is that about the same?
Yeah. So, okay. That definitely can be the case. So when you pull this bolt kit out the back, if you look at this, you have 4 O-rings, 3 on the back here, 1 in the front. And that any O-ring that sits, they call it stiction with O-rings. As an O-ring sits, it kind of embeds itself into the surface that it's contacting, and the friction goes up significantly. So back in the day, when we were all starting to go with electronic guns, which had O-rings on our firing components, prior to that, it was just mechanical parts sliding and hitting a poppet valve. But when we started going electronic, we all had to learn that O-rings build up friction as they sit, and we had to compensate for that electronically. We would have what's called first shot drop off. A lot of guys don't even know what that means or what that's for. It's a setting on your circuit board that increases the dwell for the first shot after the gun sits for a period of time. So basically your board has a timer, and it says that after it sits for so many minutes or hours, wherever you set it to, it's going to increase the dwell by a certain value, whatever you set that to compensate for that friction increase of the O-rings in your bolt assembly. So just like we have it with the components that cycle, you have it with the parts that you pull out of a gun. We have tweaked the compression of these seals, and it's a balance. You want to have enough compression where you get a reliable seal, but you also don't want to have too much where you have too much friction to pull it out. So the most important thing that's going to help you, keep these O-rings greased. Some people put their bolt kits in completely dry. You're going to get a lot of friction. And so you want this to be easier, lube these O-rings. Now, in prior versions of the Luxe, we used to have a 90 durometer on the back O-ring. And that was because of our rearmost seal in the very back was sealing right where there was a radius coming out of that breech. And if it wasn't a 90, it could blow out during the shot cycle. So that one increased the friction level because it was a harder O-ring. So we're now softer O-rings on everything, and we're urethane, as you can see, so they have less friction. But keep these lubed. That's going to help you the most. And yes, we have tweaked those O-ring groove dimensions to reduce that amount of squeeze on those O-rings and that friction level.
So I have a buddy, he has shot a pro's gun that had one of the early generation grips, and he was kind of knocking the grips online. And I said, look, that's like first generation grips. Do you want to talk? A lot of people don't realize that if you get an idle right now, you're going to have a free grip later. Do you want to talk about that? Because people have been talking about the grips. I don't think they realize that you have a new version of grips coming out. And
so the first batch of grips we got was not something we would even send out for retail guns. We only sent them on team guns for the teams playing the Vegas event. We wanted to get the guns to them so they could use them at the first event. So they had all the advantages of the idle bolt design, the brittle paint handling, the charging improvements, the board upgrades, the ASA. We wanted to get them all the improvements of the idle so they had the best chance to win. And the first grips that went out were not anywhere near what we would send out for a retail gun. Now, even the retail grips, okay, so there's a lot of time delay in after a grip design is done, an injection mold part is designed until you get parts and you actually get something in your hand to test and make design changes and improvements if necessary. And the grip, we are making design changes to. It did not come out to our expectations. And anybody, there's a card included with every gun. You will get a free upgrade. So the grips
It's tracked by serial number, I think, right? You go to the website, enter your serial number, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, enter your serial number, and yeah, you're gonna get a free set of grips. So these ones you have right now are just temporary, and we are working on a improved design already. So
yeah, because I mentioned that on his review.
But yeah, the grips that went on the team guns were nothing that we would want to even show to the public. They were just for team guns. I know some of those teams I think might have left some of those guns slip into the public, and that they were never meant to be. They were just to get those guns to the team so they could play with them. And we had a very limited number of guns. I think no more than 100 went out. We had heat, damage. I can't think of all of our teams off the top of my head, but they were intended just for the players making the Vegas event, and that was it. So
and somebody had a problem with their gun in Vegas because someone asked about that earlier, like, "Oh, I heard there was a problem." But that was, I think it was a grip thing, right? And that's that's the new grips is gonna resolve that. I think it it was where it tucked into the sides or something like that. You weren't there, but it was a grip thing. So that's it's a first generation grip. That's why people shouldn't be making their final decision on the grip based on.
Yeah, like I said, we didn't hide that. There's an insert card with the gun saying that the grips are not to our liking, and we are already working on a redesign.
So I don't like using bolts to prevent rollback. I think the bolt guide extension is a brilliant thing, but that's what he's asking. That's what he's asking. Why use the bolt guide extension over a flat face bolt for rollback?
So, it's like I mentioned earlier, flat face bolts, they reduce flow, and we so even like your bolt face, James, isn't a fully flat face bolt. We coned it in some, but we still have it ported so it has it doesn't reduce velocity at all. We increase the surface contact of the front face of your bolt without restricting flow, and not being a fully flat face. Like I said, we've tried flat face bolts before, and my experience, we tried doing like a rubber one, and the problem was we had to go too thick to retain that rubber, prevent it from shooting through, prevent it from tearing, that it ultimately affected the operating pressure. And keep in mind, with this bolt system, changing your operating pressure 10 to 20 psi is very noticeable. The gun's going to sound and shoot completely different 20 psi higher than what it's set at stock. So it's not something that's just arbitrarily not doing because of a value that we see with a reg tester, and that's the reason why it affects the feel of the gun, the shot signature of the gun.
And maybe, I'm sorry, someone asked earlier, I thought they were talking about the grips, because I know that was one of the problems, but he's saying there was a board issue. I think that was the on-off button, and I know what that was, and they fixed that. But that's why, honestly, you can talk about that, right? That's why you give, everybody always complains when our team or some sponsor team maybe gets their adrenalines first. Well, you learn a lot, right? That's why you give the guns and the parts to Ryan or Damage or whatever. And instead of the guys that maybe were waiting in line first, is because if something's going to happen, you want the guys that maybe got their stuff free to have it first, so they could say, hey, this would happen, then you fix it. So
yeah, I mean, definitely, there's the relationship with sponsoring teams works both ways. We get instant feedback of multiple people playing with these things in all kind of different conditions, and we design and make corrections accordingly. I know we had, I think, one or two where they didn't fully put the back strap on all the way.
Yeah, it was an on-off button. That's what it was. It wasn't a board. It was on. I was there.
And the first grips, closing this back strap and getting it on fully was very difficult. That was part of.
That's what I was mentioning as a grip issue, but
yeah, the issue
turning the gun off.
Grip. I don't know what that case was, but it was probably that. Other than that, I know we had a couple where we had one board screw. It's the weird thing. Neil caught this too. We had
Yep.
One of the people in our assembly was really over tightening one of the mount screws for the board in here, and the head of the screw was biting into and damaging one of the circuits. So we actually put a felt washer under that to prevent that from happening, and that was something we took back from just feedback from the event.
So do you want to
What
talk real
else?
quick, so people are watching this, about using TM40 screws if you have them in a parts kit on your idle, because they're different lengths now, right?
It depends on what
That's what
screws
Craig
you're
said in
talking
the tech
about.
class.
The screws that mount the ASA are the same.
He said the board mount screws, the little ones on the right side, are different, and then the actual grip screws, I thought he said, are
Well, there's no grip screws.
on. Or no,
This
I'm
one
sorry,
has
it was
tabs that
it's the
lock them
board
in.
mount screws on the right side, I think is what he was
Okay,
saying.
all right. So the two board mount screws. I think we did switch. This is one of those little details I didn't retain
Ryan,
too
you still
well in my
here?
head. I believe the thread, we went up a thread size on them.
He was saying they weren't interchangeable in the tech class. I wasn't paying full attention, so I wasn't sitting.
And I think it's because of the thread size, not the length, but I could be wrong. So, but we have that called out in our parts guide. And if those screws aren't called out in it, I'll make sure they get added to it. But our exploded parts guides are on our website so that you can look and see what specific O-rings and screws go where. So,
and we'll probably take, like we did last
most
time.
people never take their board screws out. So it's not something that's anything part of routine maintenance. So.
This is something we don't know the answer to yet, because our cans and bolts don't have WS2 coating, so we've not really tested anything yet. Just how do they compare?
Yeah, it's
so
not going to be a huge difference.
No.
It's going to be, they're going to be similar in most ways. It's going to be comparing the whole thing, though, your bolt parts, your barrel inserts. So, but it's not going to be a huge difference.
Yeah, that's what I've said before. It takes, I think, the way to get the advantage is to use all of it together, like the SAS with the bolt kit and all that. Idle mech frame and Era mech frame. He just got one. Era mech frame seems like a big improvement. Yeah, the idle has all that, and more, right? I know our trigger is longer. Is the stock idle trigger longer than the stock Era trigger, or is it about the same?
Yeah. So the Era trigger guard was shifted down. I think we shifted it like 50 thou. That might not sound like a lot. That's noticeable. And the Era was shifted down. The Luxe was shifted down, the idle, and yours was shifted the most, 80 thou. So, and your double O-ring seals, the post on the frame to body, frame to ASA, that crosses over with both guns, the Era and the idle.
So it's a little late for this now, but would love extra parts labeled in the parts kit. I don't think it has like the inside cover or anything like this is what's in.
No, yeah, it doesn't. That's been mentioned several times. We're definitely going to do that eventually. So
yeah, and I'll probably make another tech mat like we took your parts explosion.
What I always tell people is any O-ring or screw that you're changing, the one you take off, match up with the one out of the kit. The only additional advice that goes with that is when you're changing O-rings, you can identify O-rings by their color. If they're black, they're Bunas. If they're white, they're urethane, and they're typically the 90 durometer, harder durometer. If they're semi-translucent or yellowish, they're the softer 70 durometer urethane. So you match up your O-rings for size by just placing one over top the other, and then by material, you're just matching up the color with what you took off and what you're putting on. So urethanes, you always want to replace with urethanes. Urethane O-rings are much more abrasion resistant, wear resistant, and Bunas are you're typically just kind of what we call static seals, non-moving. So they're just on a part that just sits in place once the gun's assembled, and kind of a lower stress, lower importance seal.
Someone posted this earlier. I've never seen this, so it's kind of throwing me off, but they just got their idle in, and when they start the ramp, the back cap starts to lift. Sounds like a drag car.
Okay.
Have you seen that?
We did just notice something like that. Okay. We have a fix for that. That was something
I don't know
that,
if Nick, he asked us a long time ago. Hopefully he's on this, but if not,
okay.
I'll
Just tell him to call in. We have something that will address that very easily. Drop in part that completely eliminates any movement in the tail cover. We know that's something that bugs people when they sit there and dry fire, which is going to have the most, impact or vibration in the gun. So yeah, and some of them we noticed it did just bounce a little bit. So yeah, we have a fix for that.
Okay, good question. I don't know on time frame on our bolt kit versus the gun. That's a it's too early right now. I know our
So I got your bolt parts right here. We just sent out. We had to do a tweak on the extension. One small little tweak correction on that. One more tweak correction on the O-ring groove dimension on the front. So just sent out for new samples. I'll probably have them within 2 weeks, hopefully.
And then WS2 is going to take what, 3 weeks, something like that.
3 to 4 weeks for WS2. Yeah.
And then my packaging
the
will probably
are on track where they're not going to affect the release of the gun. It's going to be all the machine parts.
Yeah. I think he's asking, will I offer the bolt kit for stock idles before the gun? Probably. Depends on. Yeah. Probably that will come in.
If we rushed them, yeah, it's possible.
That could be first. And then I'd say my packaging is probably still, well, we're getting ready to get it shipped and production. Once production's like a week, maybe on the packaging, it's going to take 5 weeks or so with, sea freight. So, but probably it's possible those could be done first. So,
yeah. Yeah. They definitely possibly could be first. Yeah.
All right. I don't see any more questions. I mean, I said we try to do it for an hour, and it's been 2 hours and 6 minutes. So we had about.
Ryan guessed you were going to be 3 hours tonight, which I was shocked when he said that. I didn't know how long these sessions went.
Well, I mean, honestly, you just answer until people stop asking questions. So or I get yelled at. So
yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for being on tonight. I think it was pretty informative. Hope the guys liked it, and we really appreciate it. I know the crowd likes it. Everybody learned a lot, I hope. So anyway, we'll have somebody on again sometime. Hans doesn't do this much, so this is a rare treat. So we really appreciate him having on, and I'll let you guys know when we do something like this again. But yeah, you guys are very welcome, and we will catch you. Oh man, somebody stayed up in the UK the whole time. I know Neil dropped off, so he was just down there from the beginning. I think he went to bed.
Well, and Peter's out of England, I know.
Yeah, so a couple people definitely stayed up. So appreciate you guys. And we definitely have some people on the West Coast. We try to make it in the middle as much as we can. So, all right. Well, yes, it was a great show. I appreciate it. And thank you to Hans. And we will catch you guys next time.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yep.